This week on Lemon's Car Spotting.
Hey everybody, it is Eric, Nick, it is Thursday, it is Lemon's Car Spotting. Let's get into the bad cars right away.
Oh man, we're into the cars and into the bushes. It's a PT Cruiser YU Classic. Ah man, the PT Cruiser. What is there to say about the PT Cruiser? We've seen a fair number of them on Lemon's Car Spotting. And what are the highlights of the PT Cruiser? One, Jay and I used to produce PT Cruiser Quarterly magazine. That I am not kidding. That is a thing that actually happened. Two, it's a car that nobody actually bought. It usually is a hand-me-down from somebody who has a 50% chance of being not alive anymore.
Right.
And three, surprisingly good Lemon's car, as is the Neon, with which the PT Cruiser shares a lot of its hardware. Let's focus on the last bit, just because we've seen a handful of PT Cruisers and Lemons, but we'd always be happy to see more. And unlike most of our other recommendations, where you're going to bring some car that just causes you no end of heartburn, PT Cruiser has the potential of being an okay Lemons car. One of my buddies was saying that he had a friend who had a line on a turbo PT Cruiser, and which is actually a legitimately pretty quick car. And he was saying, will the Lemons judges bust us for that? I was like, well, probably not, because it's a PT Cruiser. Oh, what's the worst that can happen? PT Cruiser wins the race by 50 laps. Optically, that's okay for our brand.
Yeah, 100%. And, as a Lemons judge, I will give you carte blanche to do whatever the hell you want to a PT Cruiser engine. You want to put an SRT4 setup on there? Do it. It'll be awesome. Watching a PT Cruiser wipe the field would be incredible. That would make a weekend for us.
Watching the dudes in the E46s and the 944s getting dusted by a PT Cruiser is possibly the reason why we started the 24 Hours of Lemons in 2006. So, don't disagree. If you're looking for one that's cheap, here you go.
Look no further.
How did so many bushes grow in such a relatively short amount of time? Yeah. That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Just quick sidebar. I think it was Matt Hardigree, former Jalopnik editor. Maybe it was Patrick George. I don't remember. Whichever of them writes for the Autopian, run by Lemons judge Jason Torchinsky periodically, or he definitely runs it, but Hardigree writes for them periodically. Wrote an article called "The PT Cruiser is Cool Again," and I just want to go on record to say that is simply not true at all.
Talk about a clickbait, the results may surprise you. I feel like they don't in this case.
No.
All right.
Next, ready to move on. Yeah. Oh, man.
Staying in the family.
Stellantis. Yeah, this is some classic Stellantis stuff. Now, this is a Chrysler Sebring sedan.
Yeah.
Which is different mechanically in all ways from the Sebring convertible. I think I've got that right.
I think you're right. Yeah.
The coupes were definitely some kind of Mitsubishi or had Mitsubishi engines.
Yeah.
This one, I don't know. All I know is that it is in the state of most 20-year-old Sebrings, and the bumper sticker that says "Exotic Princess" tells you a little bit about probably its last owner.
See, the confusing thing to me is that, this looks like, the victim of some low-level street crime, but what could the wheels possibly have been to make them worth? So yeah. I don't, or the whole car is stolen. is that something that happened? I don't know. It seems
it is entirely possible that somebody stole a 2003 Sebring and realized that the wheels were the most valuable thing because they can be used on other cars.
Yeah,
and that,
right.
that the whole of the rest of it was worth about $91. And the wheels probably $100. So you can get away with the wheels. And then
if it's got the same bolt pattern as an Ultima, you can continue to commit low-level crimes. So yeah. But I mean, boy, Christ, what year is this thing? Is it like a 2004, a 94? I don't know, but man, like Chryslers of that era are all like this, where it's just some random ass mismatch of parts. Nobody knows what it is. It was cheaper than a Camry, which hooked enough buyers that then, wound up. I mean, this is the ninth owner that did this to it, but it's just you had to be real stuck to buy this instead of an Accord or a Camry at the time.
Yeah, or even a Malibu.
Man, and isn't that saying something? Good Lord.
Yeah.
All right, next up, got a big old Cadillac, probably a Coupe de Ville. Oh, or is it a convertible? See, we ran into this problem in the last installment where Cadillac with Landau top, is it convertible question. The Landau tops are thicker, but when they're all like torn up and eaten by wolverines, you can't really tell. And then it starts to look a little bit more like a convertible top. So anyway, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's a giant Cadillac. These are cool, actually. I mean, what year is this? It's like a 69, something like that.
Mid to late 60s with the stacked headlights is 67. And
okay. So, I mean, these cars are, I feel like, what do these run when they're in decent shape? I feel like that there's like the old, like if you're buying a 59 Cadillac, that's like legitimately a collector car. And then, once you get into the late 70s, 80s, things are getting to more towards the end of the worthless end of the spectrum. And then you've got this, which is like, I think for a long time, people overlook them because they don't have that 50s aesthetic of old Cadillacs that people want. But boy, you put one of these on like some big old wheels and lower it down, it becomes a pretty cool car, I think.
Yeah, 100% agree. And this is, I think, around the time the Cadillac big block started to get really big. Yeah. I don't know if this was still a 425 or whatever at this time, but the 500 wasn't too far off. And I mean, you want to talk about ultimate luxury in 1970, it's, a 500 and a giant 27-foot convertible, which I think this one actually is, with the big slab side. There's some really neat stuff with these, as you point out. I mean, first of all, the size is just spectacular, but it still has like the vestige of the 50s fin on it, which I think is really interesting for a car 10 years after fins are out of vogue. But yeah, super cool cars. Would love to see one of these in Lemons.
Yep.
And to the exact polar opposite of quality or luxury, I guess. But, similarly weird and cool. Obviously a Subaru by Recreational all-terrain.
Recreational all-terrain.
Yeah.
So something like that, yeah.
Yeah, the famous chicken tax car.
Yeah.
This one looks like a pretty early one, or all the trim has just fallen off it. 50-50 on that. But yeah, these are fundamentally probably as good as anything Subaru made up until 1988-ish, I guess.
Yeah.
It's got the exact same Subaru driveline that they put in everything else. But, it's functional. I guess the wagons were probably functional on a similar level. I don't know. We've only ever had one Brat race in Lemons. We'd love to see another one.
Yeah, absolutely. We're treating the chicken tax thing as something that all viewers of this channel are aware of, which you probably are. But real quick, the short version was something about there was a retaliatory tax. There was some dispute with. It was like Americans had tariffs on something, and then so we're going to tax it. Anyway, long story short, what it resulted in was the inability to sell a certain kind of light utility vehicle without doing certain things in the States. This continued all the way through the Ford Transit Connect had to do weird stuff where they either had to put seats in or take seats out to work around this weird chicken tax thing. All of this is a very roundabout and bad way of describing why the Subaru Brat had those weird little jump seats in the back, which is something that is just iconic. Like every car person, when you think of the Brat, that's the first thing you think of. They're these really crappy, rickety little jump seats with BMX handlebar grips that I guess were supposed to keep you in the vehicle. Am I making up this story where Motor Trend's Johnny Lieberman was on some kind of a jury for a case involving exactly that, where some drunk teenagers were out in a Brat and then somebody got ejected out of the chicken tax BMX grip seats. And then there was either a lawsuit or a criminal case resulting from that. And as I recall, it's that's the lemoniest story ever. And, and then I was on this jury and then this dude got launched out of a Subaru. But as I remember, Johnny was traumatized by what actually happened to that person. It was I don't want to talk about it, dude. It was bad. It was real bad.
Yeah.
So
that
there
sounds
you go.
Right. Yep.
I think that's something like the story. Oh, man, I'm getting all the caddies these days. Well, this is a what? This is one of the front-wheel drive, just Sedan Seville? What?
Yeah, I think it's a Sedan DeVille.
So this is a front drive because at this point, this is the 90s. And you could still get the big old V8 body-on-frame rear drive one. That was the Fleetwood. Yep. And then you could get this, which was front drive. Could you get a North Star by this point?
It's probably butting up against the North Star. I don't know if they ever had the North Star in this kind of boxy one.
It was either that or the HT 4100 V8, which is famously not. It has a reputation for being not good on the street. And the few times we've seen them in Lemons, they've done remarkably well. There's a Miata running a 4.5 version or even a 4.9. So it was called the HT 4100. They were all called the HT 4100. The first version was a 4.1, but then there was a 4.5 and a 4.9, I think. And then even if you had the 4.9, it was still called the HT 4100. Anyway, these Miata guys put one into their Miata, and that thing is fast. It's won a Lemons race, and it's one of those things if you want to convince the judges that you've got a cheap V8 swap Miata, that crappy ass Cadillac V8 is a good way to do it.
Yeah, 100% agree. This one is, this has all the hallmarks of a snowbird. Somebody who drives to Florida every winter. It's got the Florida color option, which is the baby blue over, gray.
Yeah.
And this one's obviously been sitting at Grandpa's house for 20 years, long enough to gather some moss. So pretty impressive. Yep.
It's pretty good. All right. Last car of the week.
Is that a Pinto wagon? What am I? Oh no, it's a Dodge. Like an Aspen.
That was my thought, but yeah, that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go with your gut. When you see an Aspen wagon, just go with your gut is the moral of the story.
Yeah. We've had an Aspen race in Lemons. It's kind of been cut up and it's been running an Ecotech engine for most of its time. So not a true Aspen in the sense that it doesn't have a slant 6 or a 318. But yeah, famous for being one of the worst cars that Chrysler ever built, which is really saying something. Yeah, the replacement for the Dart, it was supposed to be kind of the compact-ish car, compact in the sense of American cars from the 60s anyway. But yeah, I seem to recall these had some serious rust issues, wherein they were rusting basically within a year. They had all the emissions from the late 70s choking all their engines down to, 80 horsepower for a slant 6. This one's obviously a project ready to be taken home with all of the parts in it, which is kind of the standard condition for any Mopar, really. If you're going to try and buy one, they all seem to look like this in some sense.
There's a lot of delusions of grandeur in the Mopar community, and you'll get a car that's partially disassembled and has, everything needed to finish it in back. It's interesting that these were so bad because the ingredients, and we've talked about this before, say what you will about Mopar, but the slant 6 and the 318 were as good as anything in terms of durability. Plenty of aftermarket support. If you wanted to run one in Lemons, I mean, if the rust was the major issue, then, we don't care about that within reason.
Yeah.
I guess it's just a matter of finding one that's ready to go. And as Eric pointed out, this is it right here.
Yep. That's the one sitting there in Colorado.
All right. Well, I've got the hooptiest for this week. I'm going all the way back to the beginning to the PT Cruiser in the bushes. It says it's in Hawaii. Well, that explains why the bushes grew so quickly around this relatively modern car. I mean, it's. I wouldn't discount this as a Lemons build by any means, because, as I said, surprisingly okay in that context. But boy, when you've got a PT Cruiser that was questionably cool to begin with, despite what Matt Hardigree might say, this is so far deep in the bushes. It's just incredibly hoopty.
Yeah, there are no options probably for this one other than to just crush it, put it out of its misery, or continue painting it, because obviously it was somebody's art project for a while too.
If you pulled it out of the bushes, would just that exposed corner be painted?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's the Schrodinger's PT Cruiser right there.
Yeah.
For the Lemons build, we always tend to lean in towards stuff that's IOE worthy. Index of fluency being our top prize for the crappiest car that does the best. And usually we kind of tip those scales in favor of cars we haven't had before. While we have had the convertible versions of the Sebring, I think we've had one coupe version. We've never had a sedan version of this era. And I mean, theoretically, you could probably put some 3000 GT stuff in it. Maybe. I don't think anybody actually knows, but you could probably make this reasonably kind of a little fun and then chase an IOE with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice for the Lemons build. The funny thing about a car like this is that as car people, we've seen, GT350 Mustangs, Ferrari GTOs. We've seen all of that stuff. We've all been to, major car shows where there's a row of identical Ferrari 355s. This is the kind of thing that you don't see ever. Yeah. And despite the fact that it's relatively modern and, obviously was intended to be a mainstream car, it's actually rarer than a Ferrari 250 GTO at this point. So, combine that with putting it into action on a road racing circuit. I think that it's a no-brainer. You got to go for it.
Yeah, 100%. And you can also do an exotic princess theme, and you're all set right there.
Yep. All right, that'll do it this week for Lemon's Car Spotting. Keep tagging your photos on Instagram with hashtag Lemon's Car Spotting. We'll find them. We'll talk about them. And in the meantime, find yourself a Sebring, turn it into a Lemon's car.
Make sure you reuse those wheels on your Altima.